Welcome to today's episode of Rainer on Leadership. I'm one of your co-hosts, Sam Rainer, and I have with me a very special guest today. In fact, this is a great episode. This is an episode, listeners, this is an episode that we have never done before, and we've never had this guy on the show. I want to welcome Ryan June to the show. Ryan, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Nobody knows who you are. But
nobody knows who I am.
But they're about to learn. Everyone's like, Ryan June, he looks like a pastor. If you're watching on YouTube, you kind of look like a pastor, but you're not a pastor. You're a lawyer.
I am a lawyer.
Now don't turn
a pastor, maybe. I don't know.
No. Don't turn off. Don't turn the show off, because we're going to cover some legal issues, and I'm not a lawyer, so I can't speak well into those issues, but Ryan can, and he is from Castañeda and Heidelman. Is that Spanish and German?
Yes, Peruvian and German. Yes,
Peruvian. Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, my church just got back from Peru. Did a mission trip.
Really?
Down there.
Really?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
So we'll have to talk about
my
that
parents
later.
are about to go to Peru on a mission trip with crew. Yeah.
C&H, as they're often called, I believe, is how you guys often refer to yourself. They are a law firm, and they specialize in a lot of church stuff. And so what we're going to be talking about today is the top 5 legal issues that churches are facing. Ryan can absolutely speak into this, but before he does, I want to thank our sponsor, Rooted. If you haven't checked out the Rooted experience, you absolutely need to. It's curriculum, but it's way more than curriculum. It is a proven plan to help your people connect to God, to the church, and to their purpose. It's also a great way to launch groups. They have discipleship programs. They've got great pathways. I absolutely love this curriculum, and I highly recommend it to every size church. So whether you're a small church or big church, they can absolutely accommodate you. You can go to experiencerooted.com/church answers, and that'll take you to a landing page where we get credit. That would be nice if you did that. So experiencerooted.com/church answers. We'll put a link in the show notes as well. But go check out their free download. They got some stuff there for you. So that you can learn a little more about who they are and what they do. So experiencerooted.com/church answers. All right, Ryan, you've never been on the show before. Have you ever been on any radio show or podcast before?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't think I have.
Okay.
I've done a lot of presentations, but never in the context of a podcast or a radio program. I used to work at Moody Bible Institute, so I did a lot of work on radio related projects.
There you go. Well, welcome to being on air. Without getting to all the details that nobody cares about, we got connected through a mutual acquaintance business partnership. And I was just like, we got to get you on Rainer on Leadership to talk about some of this stuff. So I want to jump right into this and just talk about these 5 legal issues. And hey, listen, everyone, this is not legal advice, right? We're just talking shop. Brian kind of wanted me to say that, like, if you need a lawyer, you shouldn't be listening to this. You should be talking to a trusted lawyer who specializes in what you need. But we'll also put a link to Ryan's group in the show notes as well. So if you feel like you want to reach out to him, I would encourage you to do that. They're a great group. They're a wonderful group. They help a lot of churches. So Ryan, let's start with child protection policies. Kind of this frontline defense against liability. Why should a church have this? Do you need a lawyer for this? I mean, walk me through why child protection policies are important.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think really at the end of the day, the child protection policy is most important just to protect children. I think in this day and age, we've become more attuned to and just aware of issues that can happen in the church. The vulnerability of kids who are, spending time in the church without their parents. There are risks there. And it's just really important to think through those risks and to protect them. A lawyer can be helpful, but I don't think a lawyer is necessary for this. There are a lot of organizations and associations for churches that will help with something like this to tailor. You can get templates and then basically tailor them to what's appropriate for your church. But you're thinking about things like, mandatory reporting. Want to make sure that things that might happen that are concerns would get escalated to the right people in the church. Things like making sure kids aren't alone with an adult, but that there are always two adults, two unrelated adults at any time. Just thinking through intentionally how to protect kids, how to protect vulnerable populations. If we don't do that well, it risks hurting the ministry and the reputation of the church. And so that's kind of first and foremost. Just
So
doing,
what I'm hearing
yeah,
from you is keep it basic. It
yeah,
doesn't have to be complex. This doesn't have to be a difficult issue. Have policies, write
right,
those policies down, make
yep,
them simple so everyone can understand them, and then abide by them, no exceptions.
right,
Um, and so, if you're sitting here going, wow, writing a child protection policy, it does sound like this big thing, right? But it doesn't have to be. It can be something as simple as a one page with bullet points. And these are our rules, and we stick to these rules.
yeah. And I think really thinking through who are you as a church? What's your size? What's the complexity? And tailoring accordingly. So simple thing for a small church is great. Bigger churches might need a little bit more help. Bigger churches might want to work with a lawyer because there's a lot going on, a lot of complexity. But it ranges based on the church, based on the population.
Yeah, and things change if you have weekly ministries as well, as opposed to
Yeah,
just Sunday and Wednesdays. I mean, we have a
right.
school, so in essence, it's a partnership with the local Christian school. Got a lot of connections there. I like
Yep.
to think of it as our preschool, even though it's not.
Yeah.
Those kids are like my kids. We treat them as such because they're on our campus 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. So that adds a layer of complexity. If you have after school programs, and now we just added a high school as well on our third floor.
Mm.
So we've got young kids on the first floor, high schoolers on the third floor. We need to have a lot of understanding as to how we keep these children safe, because the number one priority obviously isn't legal protection. As
Right.
important as that is, the number one
Right.
priority is we don't want anything to happen to a child.
Well, yeah, and I guess to expound on that a little bit, a lot of times churches are doing a really good job of it, and they are caring for children, and then you might still have something that happens, some crack in the process that just doesn't quite get addressed. And if you don't have a policy, it makes it look like you didn't care. It makes it look like you weren't thinking about it, even if you were doing everything right, even if you had the best training in the world. If you didn't document it, if there is something that happens, it's just a lot harder to show that you really did care.
And that's another great point. Have a form. We call it an incident report form,
Hmm.
where if
Hmm.
anything of note happens, just write it down. We will document something as common as a bite. So a child
Mm.
bites another child, and there
Yeah,
was a mark that was left.
yeah,
It's obvious. Like you're about to send this kid back with their parents, and then they have a giant
yeah,
bite mark on the arm. Document that. So anything where your gut is telling you like, yeah, this isn't good, even
yeah.
though you may be completely innocent in everything and in every way, documenting that is important. And we just have a one pager that we fill out for these incident reports.
Yeah,
It's a bit
and
cumbersome, but it's worth doing.
yeah, and on the documentation, making sure you also document, if there's something that you identify as a potential risk or a potential vulnerability, some incident happens, you say, oh man, this happened because of X. We need to make sure we don't have X happen again. Document what you did to fix it. I have worked with a client where they did such a good job of documenting the incidents every single time, but I kept saying, you got to also document the follow through. You got to document the follow through, because if you don't do that, again, you might have followed through every single time, and you might have fixed whatever vulnerability it is that you identified every single time. But if something 10 years down the road happens, and all you have is the documentation of all the risk and how this is an issue, and it's an issue and it needs to be fixed, but you don't ever document what you did about it, then that can be used against you in a negative way. So again, documentation, you might be doing all the right things in the world, but the documentation helps to just prove that up, to actually help your legal liability.
Great point. Hey, let's switch to
Yeah.
property disputes and property issues. So we went multi-site. We have another campus. Multi-site sounds so impressive. We have a small second campus, but it is another campus. We adopted another church after fostering them for
Okay.
a season, and we went through that whole process. It went so well. Everything was on the up and up. They asked to be adopted. We weren't poaching them. I feel like our church did everything right. And then we get to the name on the deed and the title and all that stuff. And every place, the
Mhm.
name of the church that we were adopting and all of these legal documents, the name of the church was a different
It's
name.
different.
And that was the big heartache here
Oh
because we had
man.
lawyers involved and they were great. They honestly, we had to pay them a lot of money just to figure out what is the name, the legal name of this stinking church. And I say that with all love and respect. It's like you change the name on everything. So give us a quick, kind of brief overview of like property deeds, insurance, usage agreements, and keeping all of that up to date.
Yeah, I mean, you did a good job of identifying the risk. The chain of title is just really, really, really important, and the documentation matters. And it's with a lot of things that are legal related, it's something that nobody cares about, nobody thinks about until it matters. And that's what you experience. Nobody cared about it, nobody thought about it because it was with, the church had control of it until they wanted to transfer control, and the documentation didn't show who owned the property, or it didn't show the right entity. I mean, you can have a situation where, one of the founding individuals within a church is actually the property owner, and they basically give the property to the church, but that's not documented correctly and
Sometimes
well.
pastors
And
are technically the
yeah,
owners.
right, exactly, exactly. So the key is really just to think about it, to do it, to work with an attorney to make sure that any title is clean and clear and done correctly so that can be a smooth process if and when it happens.
So,
And yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to say, that documentation is important, but it also might be a good exercise for people listening. Like, I haven't looked at the deed, I haven't checked anything, I don't know. It might be worth it just have a peace of mind. Is this clean and clear? A lot of churches, they were founded in like 1897. They haven't updated their bylaws since 1922. And, where is everything? Just doing an audit, hiring a lawyer just to do an audit and just say, I just want to make sure we get everything in order is a pretty good exercise for a lot of churches.
Yep, yep, agreed. Yeah, and as far as property goes, another big one is just space sharing, facility use when people are coming in and using the church. It's really important to have a good process around that. I mean, for one, you want to make sure that you have a good policy. Again, it doesn't need to be overly complex, but some written policy that the church uh, facilities are to be used consistent with a particular objective or mission, or organizations that believe with your statement of faith, because that can open you up to essentially becoming a public accommodation if you don't, having to rent to anyone and everyone who wants to use the church facilities. And then, separate from that, I think just making sure that you handle the finances appropriately and that you're not charging for a profit, because if you're making money on renting out your facilities, then you could potentially risk losing your property tax exemption. So that you might make a couple $100 renting out your facilities and then have to pay several $1,000s in property tax because you did so just being mindful about that.
And that's a really good point. A lot of people think in terms of like income tax, when you're
Hmm.
renting out your facility. And certainly that's an issue, but the bigger issue
Yeah.
is not the feds. The
Right.
bigger issue is your local
Yep.
property tax. And if you're
Yep.
doing for-profit activity on your campus, there is a chance, and I don't know how big a chance that is. I mean, I can't imagine this happening a lot, but there is a chance, particularly if you have an antagonistic government
Yep.
that doesn't like religion or churches, you might find yourself in a world of hurt with this. And who cares about the income tax if you're making a few $100s?
Right.
What you really
Right.
need to care about is we have a 40-acre campus or a 5-acre campus in the city like us. And in Florida, listen, man, we wouldn't be paying a few $1,000s. It's a
Yeah.
few tens of thousands of
Yeah.
dollars in
Right.
property tax. And that can really hurt a church. So great point about for-profit activity occurring on the church campus. Please make sure you understand the tax implications of that and get a lawyer, hire a lawyer before you go down that road. And if you're already down that road, it might be good to seek one out just to make
Yeah,
sure you're doing everything properly.
and I would just add, I mean, even if you live in an area where there is friendliness to the church, at the end of the day, a lot of government entities are struggling right now. They need money as much as anybody. So if they can find a hook to get, to your point, tens of thousands of dollars from your church, you know they might do it. So it's an important issue.
Yeah, and I think most churches would win these cases if they had to go to court or run up the chain of, all of the legal process. But that's just not a fight you want, right?
Right.
Let's stop the problem before it even becomes a fight.
Yeah.
Let's switch over to labor laws. So we've got child protection issues, number one, and we put that one for a reason. Like protecting kids is the top priority, right? When it comes to legal issues, it's not the legal liability you're concerned about; it's protecting kids. But then, like things you don't even think about is our title in order? It's okay. Is there for-profit activity occurring on our campus? What does that mean? That's number two. And number three, let's talk labor laws, because we've got a little note here in the show notes. It says intentions don't override obligations. So I know churches can get into some trouble here, particularly with like contract workers.
Yeah.
So walk us through that. Like what is the issue here when we're talking labor laws?
Yeah. I think independent contractors versus employees, that's probably the biggest. Maybe right behind that would be volunteers, how you're treating your volunteers. But in both cases, you're wanting to make sure that the way that you treat those individuals doesn't risk them becoming entitled to being an employee, basically, and entitled to all of the benefits of being an employee. So for contractors, it's really important to have an independent contractor agreement, thinking about control and how you approach that individual. For the most part, I mean, there's a lot of nuance to it, but for the most part, the level of control that you exercise over the person is the kind of the root of this, the single greatest factor as to whether or not they're an employee or an independent contractor. So with an employee, you can tell them when they need to report to work, how they do their job, what specifically they need to be working on, et cetera, et cetera. With an independent contractor, you give them a project and you say, hey, we'll pay you to complete this project, but they control the where, the how, uh, the specific tools are theirs. So, just because you have one thing that is, if you have an independent contractor come on to your campus and they're using your tools, that alone is not necessarily going to trigger them becoming an employee. But again, it's important to think about, want to make sure you're treating them appropriately.
All right, so let me walk you through an example here.
Yeah.
Wes, who is the one of our producers here of Rainer on Leadership.
Yeah.
He also works at my church. So we give him all the editing to do, right? Hey, we need you to edit these files. We need you to make
Hmm.
these look good, do thumbnails, all that stuff. That's part of what he does. Church and to some degree, church answers. Now he gets to determine when he does that and he gets to determine the framework, right?
Yeah.
If I was saying, Wes, I need you to show up to our staff meeting and do this and this and this, now he's getting more into the employee world, and it's a big gray area, right? And a lot of
Right.
churches, it's real fuzzy, but it is important to have that contract. And so one of the things that we do at our church is we offer 1 and 2 year contracts for everybody, and we keep them regularly updated with, okay, here's the scope of work. You are a 1099 contract worker or you are a W-2 employee. And we offer those contracts on a yearly basis so that we can make sure we're as free and clear as we can possibly be. There is a lot of gray area here, of course, but
Mhm.
it's important to know your state laws because every state's different here, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Every state's different. Again, documentation is important. And again, with volunteers, it's kind of the same issue. If you have somebody who's doing volunteer work, but you're treating them like an employee, you're treating them like you control them, then you risk some of the same issues with having to pay. Well, I mean, with the volunteer having to pay them something, where right now you're paying them nothing, but then all the labor laws on top of that, just in terms of overtime, minimum wage, all of that. So it's important to have an agreement both with the contractor and the volunteer.
Yeah, great point. All right, child protection, property issues, labor laws. Let's jump into bylaws. We've talked about this a lot on the show,
Mm.
but I want people to hear from a lawyer. Again, not
Yeah,
legal advice, but you have experience in this area. You should be reviewing your bylaws every 3 to 5 years and updating
yeah.
them accordingly. What say you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I've been on boards too, so I know how tempting it can be to not think about the bylaws because you get rolling and you've got hard issues that you're dealing with as a board trying to lead an organization, and sometimes the nitty-gritty of the bylaws can feel like the smallest, least important thing on your mind. It feels like you have bigger fish to fry, but again, like so many of the things that we've been talking about, really all the things, it's the kind of issue that it doesn't matter until it does. And when it does, if you haven't been paying attention to your bylaws and you're not operating consistent with your bylaws in terms of voting, board composition, issues of discipline or removal, related to the board and the executive director or CEO or senior pastor, whatever the situation is. All those things can come into play, and you want to, when things get hard, you'll want to make sure that the ways that you took action were consistent with what your bylaws require.
And there's some actually pretty high profile cases that are out there right now over bylaw issues with churches. Won't get into that too much because they're a bit contentious.
Yeah,
But a lot of times the courts are hesitant to jump into religious disputes, right? They are not going to,
yeah,
a court is not going to entertain a case where it's a doctrinal dispute. Like the
right,
courts just stay out of that.
right.
But where
But your
they will jump
bylaws,
in
yeah,
is if you didn't follow your own bylaws with
right,
hiring this person, letting this person, church discipline, all the issues you brought up. If your bylaws say one thing and you did another, the courts
yeah,
will entertain that case because
right,
that's not a doctrinal issue. That's not a religious issue. That's actually a legal issue.
yeah,
And you are operating outside the bounds of your own framework. Here's the great thing about bylaws. If you want to change them, you can change them. If you need to update them, update them. It's your own rules. Just make sure your own rules are up to date because you will be held accountable to them legally. And it's not an issue. People can go decades without it being an issue
right,
until it is, right? And then it's a
right.
big issue.
Yeah, bylaw. I think it's helpful to think of bylaws like a contract because that's essentially what they are. It's a contract amongst the leaders of the organization as to how they will behave and operate and make decisions and exercise control. And so, yeah, to your point, a court understands contracts. A court understands, what's right and wrong when it comes to following the documents.
All right, last thing. And I think this is one that's most fascinating, maybe not most important, but
Okay.
most fascinating. And that's intellectual property.
Yes.
Ryan, why is this an issue in churches?
Yeah.
So I take my sermons and I write a book. Can I do that? Is that allowed?
Yeah. Well, now we're getting into my bread and butter. This is where I spend the most of my time thinking and working. I do a lot of work in the copyright and trademark space for Christian publishers, and I think a lot of people don't understand is that the presumption under the Copyright Act, copyright law, is that the person who creates content, generally speaking, will be the owner of that unless they're an employee. And if they're an employee, the presumption is that it's a work for hire. So something that you create for your employer within the scope of your employment is owned by the employer. So in the church context, the presumption is that anything that you're creating for the church within the scope of your job is actually owned by the church. And that's not necessarily how churches and pastors always operate. They sometimes operate with a little bit of a different understanding where whether it's some kind of co-ownership or licensing or the pastor just owning things outright, pastor taking sermon content, turning it into books. Pastor thinks that's my content because I created it. What's often not thought about is the fact that the presumption, again, this is the presumption. This is what happens if you don't do anything about it. presumption is really that under the Copyright Act, that it's the church that owns that. So if you take church sermons and you turn them into a book, arguably the church has a claim to that. So it's just it's an issue that needs to be thought about both from a relational standpoint between the church and the pastor. But then on top of that, what kind of elevates the risk or the issue of this is that if it's not addressed up front, church pastor, they decide, hey, we agree that part of the pastor's compensations that we're going to say, pastor owns all the IP, because that's pretty common. It's pretty typical for that to be the shared understanding. But if it's not addressed up front, well, now the church owns the content and the church doesn't exercise control. The pastor goes off, writes a book, and then if it's later determined that there was an issue that wasn't addressed, the church might say, "Oh, that's okay. You own that, pastor." Well, there's also a rule under the IRS code that that nonprofits cannot just give their property to private individuals. That's called a private inurement. You're a nonprofit. You exist for nonprofit purposes. You can't just go around giving away your property to individuals or for profit for some reason. And if you do that, you risk your tax exempt status. So all that to say, it's something that's really important to think about up front.
And it's not an issue until you get that one cantankerous member who doesn't like the fact that the book was written or there was something in the book that they didn't like, or they're just out to get the pastor and create a legal issue out of it. And so one of the things we do is in our personnel handbook, in our employee handbook, we actually have language that speaks to who owns the intellectual property that's created on church time. So we have that very clearly spelled out for all employees of the church. And that's a helpful way just to make sure that you are protecting yourself, because if you don't have something in place, then you're trying to backtrack on everything. And that's usually not a good place to be if someone is suing you for something or causing some sort of legal issue.
Yeah. Yeah. A cantankerous church member, or even just a falling out between the pastor and the church. That can be, you mentioned some of the high profile cases. Intellectual property is actually a centerpiece of a lot of those disputes.
Well, good stuff with Ryan June of Castañeda and Heidelman CNH up in Chicago. Go look them up. We'll put a link in the show notes to their firm. Somebody listening may actually go, you know what? I could use their help on some of this stuff. And especially around intellectual property, that's Ryan's true specialty. Yeah. So if you are needing some legal help there, I would encourage you to reach out to them. It's great having you on the show. We'll have to bring you back, because when my dad and I talk about legal issues, we usually are like, yeah, we're not lawyers. We don't really know what we're talking about. This is kind of what we've heard through all of our experience, but you actually know what you're talking about. Yeah. So it's great to have you on the show to talk about these issues.
Yeah. Happy to be here. It's a privilege to serve churches and ministries. And we actually have lawyers in Chicago, San Diego, Dallas, Washington, D.C. So we have a lot of coverage there as well.
There you go. Want to thank our sponsor, Upward. I know that you were thinking about getting ready for all of your fall programming. At least you should be. If not, you need to consider Upward. They've got a great fall sports program. Get ahead of the curve. Get going on this. They can help you create an outreach strategy into your community. You guys know how we feel about Upward. We absolutely love Upward. Yes, they're the world's largest Christian youth sports organization, so they can handle just about anything, but they're also really personable people, high levels of customer service, and they can craft something just for your church. You're like, well, we're a small church. All that we have is a field. You know what? They can help you. Whether you got a gym or not, doesn't matter. They've got a variety of sports for every church. They will match the right program for your church and your community. So that could be flag football, soccer, cheerleading, volleyball, baseball, pickleball. They've got pickleball now, all sorts of things. Running, they've got running. So goodness, this Upward as an organization is one of the best. So reach out to them. You can go to upward.org/churchanswers. Again, upward.org/churchanswers. Link in the show notes for those of you who need the link. But we would love for you to go check out Upward. It is always great to promote them because they do such a good job. And want to thank Ryan again for being on the show. Thank you for listening. If you are tuning in to YouTube, hey, thanks for watching. Give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, give us a rate, review, or subscribe in that podcasting app. And we will see you next time on the next episode.